Welcome to Muffin Talk.
Kia ora and welcome to Muffin Talk. This program is brought to you by the initiative Titipounamu, Study and Joy. I'm pleased to welcome back Patrick Carolan, who is joining us from the United States. Patrick, a warm welcome. Hi, Mai.
Hi, how are you today? Thank you for having me again, and it's wonderful to see you.
Haere mai is the Maori or New Zealand traditional greeting where we say welcome. We welcome you to this radio program. And Patrick is a Catholic activist, organizer, and writer. He served as the executive director of the Franciscan Action Network for 10 years. He co-founded the Global Catholic Climate Movement and Catholics Vote Common Good. His writing and activism are centered on his understanding and belief through Franciscan spirituality of the connectedness of all creation and God. Only recently, I had interviewed Dr. Kurt Johnson, and he wrote a book about interspirituality. So I'm really interested in having a Catholic perspective because Patrick contributed to these two volumes, and I think that you had two essays in it, Patrick.
I did, yes.
Maybe you
Yes,
can tell us more about these
by,
two essays.
yeah, they're in volume two. The book that Kurt put together was and I think he probably mentioned this, a compilation from a number. I think there were 95 spiritual leaders that wrote essays for this. My two essays are in the second book, second volume, which is the future. The first volume was the perspective, and the second volume was the future. My essays were centered around the whole understanding of St. Francis of Assisi. One of them was, anyways, of St. Francis of Assisi and his understanding of interconnectedness and interspirituality. And, we know the story of St. Francis, a lot of the stories of St. Francis, but in particular, the one about his encounter with the Sultan Al-Kamil. And this was during the Fifth Crusade, and the Sultan was the leader of the Muslim armies, and Francis made his way into the Muslim camp. He spent, nobody knows exactly how long, but it's about 10 days there with the Sultan. And they became friends. They both understood each other's spirituality or their spiritualities was the same. Even though one was a Muslim and one was a Christian, they really, as they got into discussions about what their spirituality, about the interconnectedness of all creation with God. And it really formed an alliance. And two interesting points about that. After Francis left, the war started up again between the Christians and the Muslims, and this happened in Damietta, Egypt, and the Muslim army managed to surround the Christian army and capture some 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers. Now, in that time, what normally would have happened is those crusaders, those soldiers, would have been put to death, every one of them. But the Sultan didn't put them to death. He fed them, he gave them water, and he helped them rebuild their ships and gave them safe passage to go back home to Europe. So kind of an astounding thing that happened there. Francis went back and rewrote the rules of his order to prohibit his followers, the Franciscans, from trying to convert to Muslims. He said, we both believe in God and the same God. We just practice it a little differently, and nobody's wrong. And so, that's really one of the first examples of interspirituality.
These rules are still valid today,
yes.
Right?
Yes, they are. His rules are, and well, the other part of it, an interesting part of that story is part of the Crusades being fought were over control of Jerusalem, because the Muslims at the time had control of Jerusalem, and it was the Sultan who had control. And he later turned over control of Jerusalem to the Franciscans. He made the Franciscans the custodians of all of the Christian sacred places in Jerusalem, which they are to this day. They're still official custodians of the sacred places. And so it's a great story about two people coming together and being able to work together because they saw the goodness in each other and they saw God in each other.
Isn't it said that for so many centuries, part of that story had been forgotten maybe on both sides?
It's an interesting, I mean, it was written a little bit about shortly after Francis died. There were a couple biographies about it that mentioned it briefly. Years later, and I mean several hundred years later, there was a Protestant theologian who wrote a book on the life of St. Francis, and he talked a lot about that encounter in his book. And so, we had a Protestant theologian writing about St. Francis and telling the story of the encounter between Francis and the Sultan.
So is that part
Another,
of your writing in these two chapters that you wrote? In
yes. Yeah, well, one of them is all about that, and that story. The other one is about the whole understanding and idea of interspirituality and activism. I'm an activist, and so and people often ask me, what does that mean? And I think that to be an activist, you have to be transformative. You know, I do a lot of activism around political, especially today in my country, around political stuff. But it's the goal shouldn't be to write laws or change laws. The goal should be to transform everyone so that we have this understanding of the interconnectedness of all of us. And so that's kind of my second chapter was really about that, about the active interspirituality and activism and how they go hand in hand.
And so, do you have a lot of support in the activism in that field, also from other religions, other spiritualities, or
I,
because
um,
you told me that you are a Catholic activist. Do you work together with other activists from other faith groups?
Yes, absolutely. And we have, when I ran the Franciscan Action Network, we worked very closely with people of all religions. I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, and we actually had an interfaith council and it was leaders from all different religions that would come together. And again, I think though the thing to keep in mind is that we have to be transformative. It's not just, and I still do this. I mean, I'm out protesting a lot still, and I got arrested a lot of times for the work that I did. I did hunger fast. We organized a 30-day hunger strike on the mall in Washington, D.C., and I did, I think, 15 days of it. So I've done a lot of that. But if we're doing that for political purposes, it's going to fail. If we're doing it to transform society, then I think we have a chance to succeed and it brings hope.
And when you say transform, do you have a form in mind that it should be transforming towards?
Yes, I think we should be transforming to uh, the understanding of the oneness of each of us and all of us, transforming to, what the 13th century Franciscan theologian and philosopher John Duns Scotus wrote about when he wrote about the univocity of being and the whole understanding of the uniqueness of each of us coming together to form the wonder, the whole, the oneness of all of us. And not just human, but all creation. It's really kind of an interesting thing, I think, because we're now learning through science and through the whole understanding of quantum physics for the most part, how we're all connected. And how I could do something here and it could affect you 6,000 miles away, and how that interconnectedness happens. Science is understanding that now. But some of our mystics, like Francis and Rumi, is a Sufi mystic who understood that from a spiritual perspective. So our science today is catching up to our spirituality. And again, it's what Thomas Berry wrote about and talked about a lot. Thomas Berry was a Catholic priest. He said that we either go forth with a singular spirituality or we'll perish in a desert. And when he said that, he wasn't talking about how we practice our religion, how we practice our spirituality. He wasn't talking about whether we go to church on Friday night or Saturday or Sunday, or how we hold our hands, or whether we call God Allah or um, any other names, God or Yahweh. He was talking about the understanding of who we are in relationship to all of creation.
Didn't Karl Rahner also say something like the future will of the church will be mystic or not at all?
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
And I was thinking of your friend Kurt Johnson because he is a specialist in butterflies. and you have
Yes.
this butterfly effect, and you think, how can this little beautiful butterfly have an impact on
Yeah.
the universe? But it yet can.
But it can, yes, and that's the whole thing. And I don't know if you remember this, you're a little younger than me, but when I was growing up, we had what they called Baltimore Catechism. And Baltimore Catechism, and they taught that in all the grammar schools, all the Catholic grammar schools. And there was a question in Baltimore Catechism, and the question was, "Where is God?" And the answer was, "God is everywhere and in everything and everybody." We kind of forget that because we think God's up there someplace.
Yeah.
And yet God is right here in all of us and in all of creation. That's kind of the understanding of interspirituality, is that we're all here together, all creation, not
Mm.
only just here on earth, but throughout the universe. And God is in everything and in everybody. And so
Thank
again,
you.
it's not as relevant how I hold my hands or what prayers I say or what time I pray. It's the understanding of the oneness of all of us.
When you wrote your pieces for these two volumes, did you have the chance to read the other stories before it was
I
published?
did not read a single one of them before, although
Oh,
I know a lot of the people and I've worked with a lot of the people. And
yeah.
so Kurt had mentioned to me, I actually recruited several of the people that are in there to be part of it. They were friends of mine, and I said, "Oh, you should do this." So I had a really kind of good understanding. We all sort of think the same way.
Yeah.
And so when Kurt was putting this together, I have to admit, I wrote this two pieces. And it was a couple of years ago that I wrote him. And then, about a month or so ago, Kurt sent me an email saying, "I just want to let you know the book's out. They're going to be out in the next 2 weeks." And I thought, well, I better go back and check what I wrote, actually, this, make sure.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
that took a long time to put that
yeah.
together.
Well, I'll connect this interview also to the interview with Dr. Kurt Johnson, and then you also have the link of how to get the book and
Yes,
get
yes,
some
so
more
I don't have to
information.
say that, but yeah, and I would urge people to go out and get it and read it. It's just fascinating. Some of the, people like the Dalai Lama have written in it. Matthew Fox has written in it. Joan Chittister, a number of Catholic leaders have written in it. Some of the leading Sufis have written in it. Some Hindu people have articles in it. Kurt just did an amazing job of bringing all these different people of different religions and spiritual beliefs together to create this.
Thank you so much for your contribution, and you're part of the Catholic contribution in that work. And you'll see that we're all connected. And I think that's really important to keep that in mind.
It is. And then, the other thing I think that's important is a Jesuit priest, Teilhard de Chardin. I'm sure you're familiar with early 20th century. And Teilhard was one of the first people to understand evolution from a spiritual perspective. It was the science of it was just coming in, but he got it I mean, he was a scientist, so he understood it from the science, but he understood it from the spiritual perspective. He wrote one time that we either evolve or will be annihilated. And he
Mm.
wasn't talking about a physical evolution. He was talking about a spiritual evolution. And so I think part of him, when I talk about transformation, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is our spirituality has to really transform. Um, we have to understand that our spiritual stories are wonderful stories, but they were written in a time when people had a whole different understanding of the cosmos than we have today. And so, we don't want to throw out our sacred stories because they're beautiful stories filled with rich messages. But we have to understand that we have a different understanding of the cosmos today, a different knowing of the cosmos than the folks that wrote those stories. And so we have to look at them from that perspective.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for Muffin Talk and for talking a little bit about your chapters in that important work. And I hope that many people will read it and grow together and also build bridges between each other. I think Pope Leo
I,
is also talking about building bridges, and it's not about losing your spirituality. It's enhancing.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a real important point that you just made, is it's not about you losing your spirituality. It's not even about you practicing your religion differently. I think whatever way you practice your religion is important for you and helps you grow in your spirituality. But there's no right way. There's no one way to say my way is the one true way. Um, there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And it's important to continue for each of us to continue understand in doing that. But we have to understand that we're all together, we're all one. Your spirituality might be right for you at this moment, but you have to be open. And the other this thing, and this is one of the things that I kind of got out of reading most of the stuff in Kurt's book is, we sometimes think, and we do this in every religion, we have this understanding, this idea that we have to first be in right relationship with God. And, we do that by praying, going to church, however we do it. And then when we're in right relationship with God, then we can focus on being in right relationship with God's creation. In reality, we have to be in right relationship with all of creation. And when we're in right relationship with creation, then and only then will we be in right relationship with God. Being in right relationship with God is not about a one-on-one. It's about all of us together and connecting with each other and with all of creation. And I think that's a theme that came through in a lot of the folks who wrote for Kurt's book.
And I think that is also this picture of life unfolding. Here in New Zealand, we often take the koro from the fern, how it develops, and it's
Mhm.
life unfolding. So we have to be ready to be transformed in different times of our lives. If we believe in God, then God will lead us and we don't have to worry.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, the other part of it I think is, and a lot of people are fearful of transforming because it means change. It means a change in how you look at. A lot of us that are Catholics were raised to believe that the Catholic Church was the one true church. That's what I was taught in grammar school. Um, and so, I had to step out of that and understand that these are my brothers and sisters too. And
Yes.
their spirituality is just as important as mine. And it's, right for them, just the way as my Catholic faith is right for me. In the end, we're all part of the one.
And I think
And we're
that
all
the Vatican II
interconnected.
also got that in Nostra Aetate and being in our
Yes.
times. And in our times changes also in our times.
Yes. Yes. And I
So,
believe you and I had a whole discussion about that
yes,
recently.
yes. Thank you so much, Patrick. It's been a joy
Yeah.
to have this conversation with you and wish you all the best. And thank you for contributing in this volume on interspirituality.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. And it's, as I said, it's always a joy being on with you. So anytime I'm happy to come on and have a conversation with you. I really enjoy it. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Out there, heroic peace is calling. In the bonds of love we meet. For the world, a new day dawning and shining.